Hi everyone, welcome to your Alaska Weather TV show. This is meteorologist Joel Curtis from the Anchorage Regional Operations Center. Starting out with our weather headlines today, we got light to moderate snow for much of the state, heightened avalanche conditions through Turnagain Pass, and we have overflow problems for the sloughs along the Kuskokwim Delta. So taking a look at some of our warnings around the state, we do have a winter storm warning for the upper Tanana Valley, and that includes Eagle and Northway, and we've got 6 to 10 inches of snow forecasted, and that's through 9 p.m. on Thursday. We also have winter weather advisories for Fairbanks, Tanana, and also the Alaska Range area. We're showing that problem with the ice jam and the overflow for the Kuskokwim Delta, but that advisory is not for the entire zone where Bethel is. And then also we have a winter weather advisory for both Anchorage, Western Kenai Peninsula, and the Matanuska Valley. And we're showing, I want to show you this graphic here. We're 6 to 8 inches for Whittier and Copper Landing, also 8 to 12 for Anchorage. Turnagain Pass, as we mentioned earlier, is going to be pretty bad. Also 8 to 12 for portions of south of Wasilla there. And then we also have 4 to 6 as we get up to Wasilla, and 3 to 4 for Kenai. The rest of the Kenai Peninsula is going to get some snow there too. I wanted to show you the still shot of the radar loop. Middleton Island and Bethel radar is not working right now, but you can see there's precipitation on just about every other radar that we've got. And again, the big story here is wintry weather. So let's take a look at our satellite image. First of all, we've got a couple of old fronts that are dying out over the central portion of the state. We have a new system forming in the Gulf, and it's going to be south of the Kenai Peninsula. Also, note those really heavy showers that are out over the Bering Sea. That's real interesting that they're showing up really bright, and as you can see, they're moving along out of the west. And then we can also see the circulation of the low that's up near Anadyr in northeastern Russia, and lots of just active weather in one system after another lined up going on here. So for today's weather, we've got a 997 millibar low that's going to be just south of the Kenai Peninsula, also the 987 millibar low up by Anadyr. And again, we have those heavy snow showers over the Bering Sea and lots of snow all over the rest of the portion of the state. Some mixed precipitation in southeast Alaska with a little bit of light rain on the outer coast. And then for tonight's weather, we've got 994 millibar low has now moved into the Chukchi Sea. There's some pulses coming around that low, including the old occluded front. Our low in the Gulf is split up to 992 and 991. Those are quite a good amount of circulation there with some offshore flow through Kennedy Entrance and down there at Kodiak Island. But note that we've got almost the entire state covered with snow, and that's a real theme. And by the way, there's going to be a winter weather advisory for Hyder, I forgot to mention. So then on Wednesday, our main low in the Gulf remains nearly stationary, and it's just south of Prince William Sound there, 983 millibars. And the secondary low is now moving down toward Vancouver Island. In the meantime, with at least some light skiffs of snow and flurries across most of the state, continuing on Wednesday, and then snow showers out over the Bering Sea. And a new system, 996 millibars, is shaping up south of Shimia, and that system is going to be moving due east on Thursday, and it ends up at around 998 millibars over the eastern Aleutians. Also, we have a little bit of high pressure is built in now over 1018 over northeastern Russia and 1017 over about Bethel or so. And then again, light flurries for a major portion of the state, particularly the eastern interior, and and then also snow moving onshore for southeastern Alaska, rain offshore, and snow showers behind that wrapped up front down there. So looking at our low temperatures Wednesday morning in the 20s and to mid and upper 30s for southeast, and in the 20s for south central with 9 for Golconda and 31 down at Kodiak Island. And then our high temperatures Wednesday afternoon in the 40s for the southern panhandle, mid 30s down to 33 for Skagway, 18 for Golconda, but you'll notice that we're hanging in the 20s on Wednesday afternoon during the snowfall. And then Thursday morning, we've got temperatures generally in the 30s across the panhandle, 26 for Yakutat, 11 for Golconda, and then 20 for Anchorage, and some single digits there. Probably a Soldotna is going to get down to about 12 or so. Then for Thursday afternoon, highs in the mid-30s, cooling off for southeastern Alaska, 17 for Golconda, and then teens and to 20 for Anchorage. And then for Wednesday morning, across the north slope, single digits again, but as soon as you get west, it's still warm with a lot of open water out there in the Chukchi and the Bering Sea. Meantime, as you get across northern central, 10 for Fairbanks and 5 for Fort Yukon. And then for Wednesday afternoon, we can see, again, single digits along the north slope, again in the 20s along the west coast, but well down into the teens for our afternoon highs on Wednesday. And then for low temperatures Thursday morning, we can see that now we're getting some negative numbers for the north slope. In the meantime, single digits and -2 for Fort Yukon, 6 for Fairbanks, but as you get down further toward the southwest, 20 for Immonik. And then as we're looking at high temperatures Thursday afternoon, we've got single digits for part of the north slope, but reaching into just about 20 for the Chukchi Sea coast, and in the lower 20s for the west coast. In the meantime, Fairbanks looking for a high of about 13 or so. For southwestern Alaska, looking at Wednesday morning, we got temperatures in the teens and up to the mid-20s, 30s out along the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians, and 29 for the Pribilofs. And then for Wednesday afternoon, temperatures all 20s for all across southwestern Alaska, in the 30s and lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula and out the Aleutians, 37 for the Pribilofs. And then Thursday morning lows, starting to see that cooling off a little bit with even some single digits as you get inland, but still up to the mid-30s as you go out the peninsula, and for the eastern Aleutians, 36 for Shimei and 30 for the Pribilofs. Then for high temperatures Thursday afternoon, temperatures around 20 or so for King Salmon, 20 for Bethel, and then, but as you go out the Alaska Peninsula, look at the warming coming up there with that next system, mid-30s to upper 30s, and then finally in the 40s as you get out in the Aleutians, and 37 for the Pribilofs. And then looking at our 6 to 10 day forecast, that's December 12th through the 16th. First of all, a better chance than 50-50 for above normal temperatures from Kotzebue to Udiagavik. Some normal temperatures across the central interior, including Arctic Village, and then all the way down to the southwest of Bethel. But notice as we get further southeast, your higher probabilities of below normal temperatures, and that's going to be some significant cooling off that we've got going into the weekend, and it should last for a while. And then for our 6 to 10 day precip, a slight chance of above normal precipitation all the way from about Skagway on up to Kotzebue. So just a small area of that tending toward normal for the northeastern interior and the lower part of the Panhandle. Now looking at our 8 to 14 for December 14th to the 20th, again, a pretty good probability of above normal temperatures from Bethel to about Udiagavik. And then as we get further east, it starts to taper off toward normal, but note that the Panhandle has still got a slight chance of below normal temperatures for them. Again, with that cooling off and the upper level ridge pumping cold air in that direction for the Panhandle. And now we're going to take a look at our precipitation for 8 to 14 days, and we see that for December 14th through the 20th, we've got above normal centered on Anchorage with a higher probability, around 50% or so. And then as we look for much of the rest of the state, a slight chance of above normal precipitation, with Arctic Village being around normal or so. And then as we get down toward southeast, it's looking like normal precipitation. So lots of active weather going on. I want everybody to be safe out there. Please pay attention to your local warnings and weather advisories, and we'll be back with you about a month or so. Thank you for tuning in.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And now for your aviation weather. Starting out with the flying weather Wednesday morning, looks like the eastern half of the mainland and all the way up to the North Slope, and including the Alaska Peninsula and Prince William Sound, are having extensive IFR due to snow and fog. In the meantime, an area of marginal VFR has moved into the Bering Sea on Wednesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, that area starts to break up a little bit for the IFR, but still out by the Chukchi Sea up to Point Hope, across the central interior, and also the mountainous regions of the Panhandle, and then extensive areas of marginal VFR, including out in the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. Then for Thursday morning, the IFR reappears there for much of the eastern half of the mainland, as well as the Panhandle and down into Prince William Sound, and also the Kenai Peninsula, including Portage, and then extensive areas of marginal VFR along the west coast, out into the Bering Sea, and then also including the Gulf of Alaska and Lower Cook Inlet. By Thursday afternoon, that IFR persists along the eastern half of the interior, and extensive areas of marginal VFR across the central interior out into the Bering Sea and the Gulf regions, as well as much of the Panhandle. Northern part of the Panhandle is still staying in IFR. For our past conditions on Wednesday, Anatuvik, IFR. Attican, IFR. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, VFR becoming marginal VFR and with turbulence. Okay, turbulence also for Rainy Pass and IFR conditions. For Windy Pass, IFR and turbulent conditions. Isabel Pass, IFR. Mentasta Pass, IFR. Turbulence at Tanita Pass with IFR becoming marginal VFR. Turbulence in the afternoon for Portage, IFR becoming marginal VFR. And for Chilkoot and White Pass, IFR conditions all day. For freezing levels Wednesday morning, we got out the surface out into the Gulf, the lower part of the Alaska Panhandle, as well as across much of the Bering Sea and half of Kodiak Island. And you don't see that 2,000-foot contour until you get over into the Panhandle or well south of the Aleutians. For our icing on Wednesday, expecting some areas of isolated moderate and a little bit of considerable moderate along the western slopes of the Alaska Range, also for the Cook Inlet area, and those would be 2,000 to 8,000 foot for our icing level. And then looking east toward the Panhandle, we have much of the northeastern Gulf Coast, as well as most of the Panhandle in considerable moderate, between 2,000 and 9,000 feet. For a jet stream on Wednesday, a branch of the jet, west-northwesterlies, going across the southern part of the Alaska Peninsula and Dutch Harbor area, and ramping up to 160 knots as it gets out into the Gulf. In the meantime, we have some southerlies showing up over the Panhandle and over the eastern part of the central interior, and that doesn't ramp up until you get into northwestern Canada. For 9,000-foot winds, you got that low-pressure system off of Icy Bay, and that has got some 45-knot southerlies over the Panhandle, about 30 knots over the northern Alaska Range, and then starts to ramp up to 60 knots across Chillicothe Strait and Kodiak Island, and then also out at St. Lawrence, about a west-northwest at about 55 knots or so. And then look at our 3,000-foot winds on Wednesday. We've still got that low pressure system south of Icy Bay. Look for about 45-knot easterlies out along the beach in the northeastern Gulf Coast. Also, we got some southerlies to 55 knots over the Dixon entrance and on up into Clarence Strait. We also have outflow winds up to 60 knots coming out of Kennedy entrance and across northern Kodiak Island, and about 35 knots of the same as you get out toward the southwestern Capes. And for our turbulence on Wednesday, we've got an area of considerable moderate turbulence all across the Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, and the Alaska Peninsula. And then also we're reflecting some considerable moderate for the southwestern Capes and St. Lawrence Island. That's surface to 6,000 feet. And then over the Panhandle, we have an area of surface to 4,000 feet, considerable moderate for most of the Panhandle south of Juneau. So that's it for our aviation forecast. So fly safe out there.
So the sun, looking here from the ground, seems very constant and quiet. But actually, when we look at it from space, we can see it's quite turbulent and active. Space weather is activity on the sun and in a near-Earth space that can affect our technological infrastructure and society. The sun is constantly spewing out a stream of particles called the solar wind that goes out into the solar system. And it affects us here near Earth, where we're protected by a magnetic field. The interaction between the solar wind and the magnetic field can cause space weather. The Carrington event is the largest storm we've seen in recorded history when we're looking at space weather. But every solar cycle, which repeats about every 11 years, one estimate estimates that there's a 10% chance of getting a large storm like the Carrington event that could impact us here on Earth. But we see solar storms almost all the time. And these storms have an effect on our technological infrastructure. Solar storms can cause activity in Earth's atmosphere and magnetosphere that can damage electrical power grids that power our communities, interrupt radio and satellite communications, and can cause our GPS navigation to fail. NOAA is working with its international partners to ensure that we have different vantage points where we can observe space weather. Our space weather observing infrastructure from space includes the NOAA Discover satellite and the NASA ACE satellite that are stationed upstream of Earth to give us a first buoy measurement of the solar wind. It also includes the ESA-NASA SOHO satellite and the NASA Stereo satellite that image the sun and also make coronagraph measurements of the outer atmosphere of the sun, the corona, that can tell us when large explosions happen off the sun. We also observe the sun and the Earth's magnetic field from the geostationary location with NOAA's GOES. So the way we use the space weather information from satellites and from the ground is to be able to make forecasts and predictions, just like we do with hurricanes and terrestrial weather. We observe the sun and look for activity and see how it develops, and see if it's going to culminate into a large explosion that can affect us here on Earth. NOAA is working with its international partners to expand our observing capability. We're committed to observing along the sun-Earth line. So we're going to do the imaging of the sun and the upstream buoy measurements of the solar wind along the sun-Earth axis. More we understand about the sun, the more we can prepare for it and become, just like we are a weather-ready nation, become a space weather-ready nation. And as we look forward to humans exploring out into the solar system and advancing our space commerce activities, space weather becomes more and more important.
Here at the Space Weather Prediction Center, we monitor space activity as it's occurring back at the sun, and then we issue out a forecast as well as alerts, watches, and warnings as activity is occurring. A typical space weather event would start with a solar flare back at the sun. That solar flare is short-lived and produces fairly short-lived impacts as well, basically impacting communications on the daylit side of the Earth. However, some solar flares are also associated with a coronal mass ejection or an eruption of plasma that's blasted off the sun and out into space. As forecasters, it's our job to determine if that cloud of plasma is moving towards Earth, and if it comes towards Earth, what the potential impacts may be. Those impacts can range from a fairly low-level storm that may produce the aurora a little bit farther south than usual, or can range up into fairly significant magnetic disturbances that don't happen very often, but when they do, they can impact technologies and infrastructure here on Earth. We provide information to lots of different user groups, from airlines to the electric power grid to emergency managers, aviation, satellite community, lots of different customers.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi everyone, and now for your marine forecast. Starting out with our sea ice edge, a recent south wind has caused Norton Sound to melt and erode a little bit and break up, and the wind pushed the chunks to the north coastline of the Sound. Other areas remain fairly steady, and here's a look at the southwestern coast and also Cook Inlet. Again, you can see some leads, but the sea ice is progressing along. So, our Wednesday's marine forecast for southeast. Starting out, some 15 to 35 gale force, seas up to 11 feet on the outside, winds 20 to 35 knots gale force, winds up to 7 feet on the inside. And then for Thursday, we've got some variable wind directions with a low right offshore, and so it's ranging 15 to 25 knots, but the seas, especially in the south, building up to 18 feet. On the inside, waters 15 knots, and seas up to 8 feet for Clarence Strait. And then for the south central, we've got gale force ramping up and a storm force in Kennedy Entrance, winds westerly 50 knots and seas 19 feet, and those waves are going to spread out into the Gulf. Otherwise, we've got 15 to 35 knots on the outside and 20 to 25 knots further up Cook Inlet. And then as we get to Thursday, that wind ratchets down to about 40 knots out of Cape Kennedy Entrance, seas up to 16 feet. Some variable wind directions, 20 to 30 knots on the outside, and then 10 to 20 knots in Cook Inlet. And then for Wednesday, for the peninsula and Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait's really going to blow 40 knots, gusts to 55 knots out of the west, and then seas up to 8 feet. On the Pacific side, up to 45 knots and seas 16 feet. On the Bering side, 25 to 30 knots, seas 13 feet. For the peninsula and Kodiak Island Thursday, we've got some offshore winds up to 40 knots on the Pacific side off of Kodiak, 14 feet, and then 20 to 25 knots of sea, 6 feet on the Bering Sea side. And then for the Aleutians on Wednesday, we've got a bunch of variable wind directions, winds ranging 15 to 25 knots, seas up to 10 feet on the Pacific side and up to 12 feet on the Bering Sea side. Now we have that new system moving into the Aleutians. We've got winds around 30 knots, 20 knots drops off to 20 knots as you go farther west. Seas up to 10 feet in the Bering Sea side and 11 feet on the Pacific side. For the West Coast, we've got westerlies really kicking in behind that Gulf low. 20 to 30 knots, seas up to 16 feet near St. Matthew Island, otherwise 13 feet up out of the Pribilofs. And then on Thursday, we've got some variable wind directions ranging 10 to 25 knots, seas up to 8 feet for the Pribilofs. And then for Wednesday for the Arctic coast, easterlies 15 to 30 knots and ice-covered areas, but if you get some leads, you're going to see 4 feet. And then for the down on the Bering Strait side, we've got 20 to 25 knots, seas 13 feet south of the strait. And then for Thursday, variable wind directions, again, looking 10 to 20 knots for the north slope, and a few leads with seas 3 feet, 20 knots for the Bering Strait, and seas up to 6 feet. So for tonight, we've got the developing lows in the Gulf of Alaska, nice circulation around it. Snow is the operable word for mainland and much of the state. Snow showers all across the Bering Sea. And then for Wednesday, we've got those lows in the Gulf. 983 just south of Prince William Sound and 990 headed toward Vancouver Island. Fronts wrapped around them. Good outflow from Kennedy Entrance again. And then we've got some light snow and snow showers just about everywhere on our land, and then some snow showers over the Bering Sea. And you can see that new system coming in at 996 millibars south of Shemya on Wednesday. And then for Thursday, our low hangs in there for the Gulf of Alaska, 988 millibars, and 998 south, moved into the Aleutians, and still a lot of snow around for much of the state. Stay safe out there. Thanks for tuning in.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.